Hey everyone out there, we are coming at you live from the Fox Island Sandspit or Bella Bella Beach or Demalaine Nature Preserve. No matter what you call it, it is a fantastic location, even though it is raining sideways at us and it's about 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Hopefully you can hear me. We're doing a little bit of community science. We'll do a little bit of beach walking today until we get too cold. So if you want to post in the comments where you're watching from, that's always fun to know. If you're local and you have experience on this beach, maybe post a memory or a thought you have about it. Otherwise, we're just going to kind of walk along and see what our community scientists are up to. We're got special permission here from Penn Met Parks to be out on the beach tonight. So we're investigating. Oh, you've got a really cool worm. Nice. So on this brick, there is, I would guess, a spaghetti worm, but I can confidently say a species of polychaete, which is a segmented worm that's fairly common on our shores. And what I love about spaghetti worms is they make a casing out of sand or shell debris or even algae, basically whatever's around that they can kind of glue together with mucus. And then they hide inside that tube and stick their feeding tentacles out. So they have these long spaghetti-like tentacles that are sticky. And on a worm this size, I would not be surprised to see their tentacles stretching about 2 foot from their opening, which is crazy for a little inauspicious, not much to look at little worm. And then that's kind of fitting that it's on a brick. This end of Fox Island had a brickyard, and so there's a lot of brick debris around the beaches around here. So hey, Stina.
Hi. we had a little shaggy mouse sea slug adventure a little further up.
Ooh.
Like that out.
We'll have to, check in with your shaggy mouse, sea star. Who do we have here today? Let's do a quick roll call for posterity, right? We've got Hizoji. We've got Ashley. That's Stina. And then we have, some of my favorite people on the planet. Yes, we've got our trusty handy dandy students, Stella and Luciana. I always want to call you just Lou, and I know you kind of go by Luciana now, which is a beautiful name, and I don't blame you, but I knew you first as Louie. So all right, and then we've got Brett. So we're hanging out here. You guys are troopers to be out in this sideways cold windy rain, and we appreciate you guys being here tonight. But yeah, we're just gonna walk around. Steven, you want to show me a sea slug? You think you can find it again? So again, we're doing our community science efforts, and normally we'd be inviting all kinds of folks out to participate with us, but right now, not this one.
The next one, but it has cool flatworms.
We've got awesome stuff here. Oh, flatworms, and look, tiny, tiny, tiny crabs. All right, Stina's gonna give it a turn. Oh yeah, here we are.
We have the eggs.
So this right here, we've got a beautiful shaggy mouse nudibranch, and then the eggs, which is the reason they come up so high in the intertidal zone, is they're eating anemones and laying eggs. Oh, there's a couple of them here.
Yeah.
Nice. Such a cool find. This is one of the weirder animals out there. It's called a shaggy mouse nudibranch. Nudibranch means the unprotected gills or the naked gills. And so what we're seeing is they have the ability to breathe and takes in oxygen from their backs, which is just so cool. And then of course there's a bunch of other little crabs and shrimp and things in this touch tank. So I'm going to give these eggs a chance to be protected, and I'll put that back the way that it was when we got here. Taking terrific care not to smash those very soft-bodied little slugs. I kind of wish the slugs in my garden looked as beautiful as the sea slugs do, because they can be really quite striking. All right. So we are doing a little bit of presence-absence study, taking a look at what species are observed here, and then noting the tidal height that they're found on the beach. So Stina's, show us.
As far as beaches go, if you were to look back at our previous videos, this beach gets exciting quickly. And that's because you start seeing more boulders sooner. And so these larger rocks definitely provide habitat for more interesting life. So things like those shaggy-mouthed sea slugs.
Nudibranchs are
We're already seeing
noticeable.
chitons. And this is again one of those beaches where we're probably gonna do this full page because it's a long bit of sand.
You can't really tell, but it goes way out there. And then we have a side too.
Nice. And tomorrow we'll be doing a shorter beach, and so we'll be like done here. So it's a
these long
beaches
beaches are a lot more work. Nice. So this data collection helps us to study the beach and how it changes over time, and that's really helpful for studying things like climate change or potential sea level rise. It's also helpful to notice say if we were to have like a catastrophic event like an oil spill or something like that, it would help us to understand maybe when our beaches returned to their normal natural state. We've got some cool evidence of animals here. This is a horse clam shell. A really large clam. Check out the size of that. And I could tell it's a horse clam and not a geoduck by the opening. So see the angle of that opening. A geoduck shell is more rectangular overall. Also, just knowing this beach, there's a lot of horse clams here, and we'll get down into the lower tidal heights and start to see them, and we'll actually be able to see their siphons squirting water up and out as they're respiring and reacting to the presence of me walking on the beach, which is really kind of cool that they can respond that way. This is fondly referred to as the Fox Island sand spit because it is a large protruding section of sand and it gets quite a bit of wind. So I apologize for any wind noise that's out here tonight. But because it gets good current and good flow, we get some kind of interesting animals that we don't typically see at all of our other beaches. So one of those species is these tube worms here. And this is a tube that's not attached, so you can kind of get an feel for how large the animal is. And they're buried down in the sand. And then when the tide comes up, they'll stretch out their feeding crown. They have this, what's called a corona, which is like a crown of feathery tentacles that can kind of grab plankton from the water. And my favorite thing about this beach is to come here during the summertime on a quiet day where it's not windy and there's not a ton of people, because these worms will move up and down inside their tubes and make kind of a singing sound. It sounds like a worm kazoo chorus. It kind of is a zzz, but then magnified by 200 worms at a time. It's really quite remarkable. Let's see. So one way that you can tell that this is a pretty wave-swept beach is by looking at the sand here and seeing how it takes on this kind of wavy formation quite a bit. So let's check into our kind of rock pool here. And yeah, as predicted, I knew this would be a great spot to view some shrimp. So shrimp are fairly nocturnal, and they have these eyes that are really well adapted to capturing light. And I'm not sure if it shows up on the camera, but they glow in the light of my headlamp and the flash on my camera here, which is kind of crazy. But these are Sitka shrimp, and right now they're pretty much I realize it's hard to see with the rain messing with the surface of the water there and the glare. But these little shrimp they're herbivores, and they're going to eat this green algae that's here. And in the summer months, when the algae's really growing and the shrimp are eating a ton, they turn bright green, which is just super cool. It's like great camouflage to take on the coloration of your food and your habitat. It's kind of a very clever way to stay hidden. in the intertidal zone. Everything is food, I like to say. So everything that's here gets eaten by something. And it may be some animal that comes in only on the high tide, and so the low tide is kind of their respite from predation, or it may be the opposite, that they have to worry about the things that are going to be consuming them during the low tide. So we've got a couple of moonglow anemones here. So this is an anemone that is capturing plankton. They also would be eating shrimp, so I'm not surprised to see this anemone thriving in this little section. Here's another one right over here. Yeah, they're just beautiful anemones. They can kind of be orange or greenish or pink or white or gray. And then again, lots and lots and lots of those little shrimp hanging out in the tide pool here. Another thing I like to do on the beach is anytime I find wood debris that's small enough and safe enough, I like to turn it and just see if there's anything hanging out. It looks like only a couple little shore crabs here. All right. So here's one that's showing a little bit of that green color that they take on. And this is an interesting one. It's got two little brown blobs on the side, for lack of a better word. And those, I believe, are parasites that invade the carapace of the shrimp and live underneath the surface of their skin, protected and sucking the blood of that animal. They don't usually kill them. Generally, parasites aren't in the business of eating their host entirely. So you see sometimes quite mature shrimp with quite mature parasites living in their shells. But certainly the shrimp would prefer not to have that. And then there's another tiny little creature here. This is a sand dollar, just a juvenile, so it hasn't quite got that coloration that we're used to seeing, the dark black or kind of dark purple color. But it'll color up. We'll see more sand dollars here as the tide goes lower. All right, so let's walk along and get to a little bit different habitat and see if we can find something. This open sand habitat, believe it or not, is actually really great for spotting nudibranchs. We see lined nudibranchs quite often here, and giant swimming nudibranchs, both species of sea slug. And there's no real rhyme or reason to where they are, just they get caught as the tide goes out and they're kind of drifting along. And sometimes you can capture them and get a glimpse of some cool creatures. All right, let's go a little farther down the spit. I'm kind of traveling, if you were to come to this park, I'm traveling off to the right. Ooh, and I can see some evidence of different species here. We've got, this is a purple Varnish clam. Pretty common here on this beach. We've got a butter clam shell. Butter clam shells generally have really thick, heavy shells. This looks like another butter clam with more horizontal banding. This looks like a bent nose clam, but the tip is broken off, so I can't really show you the bent nose. And then there was, just a second ago, a clam right in this hole. We'll find some more. I kind of know where the clams like to hang at this beach. There's a lot of stuff kind of washed up on the beach. Lots of wood debris and broken bits of algae and things. That generally means we're in the middle of winter and we've had some storms. But here are those tube worms, just thousands of them. They're everywhere. This whole beach is just covered. Maybe if we're quiet, we can hear them. No, I don't hear them. But you can see there's really a lot of them out there. It's good, productive habitat for them. Let's see what else we can find. This is a beach where I would predict that we will see lots of leather stars. Oh my gosh. It's like I scripted this myself. As predicted, here we go, leather stars. This is a fairly common species of sea star. And this is one that's really kind of had a population boom in the past several years, while other species like the sunflower star, which would prey on these, has been kind of fallen ill and had big population decreases. About 90% of their population has gone extinct, and they're now listed as critically endangered. One of the programs that Stina's gonna work with tonight is a sea star survey. So they'll walk this beach and measure any sea stars that are healthy. They'll make note of that, and then they'll also pay attention to any that are what we call wasted, that are suffering from symptoms of that sea star wasting syndrome. So underneath, I can gently flip this animal and show you they have tube feet, and those tube feet do move, which is really neat to see. They can't really walk or travel much when the tide is low. So generally when you see them, they do appear stranded, but as soon as the water hits them, they'll be able to move. Even if they're upside down, they can flip themselves over. But if you're ever concerned about a sea star, if you're not going to damage it by moving it, then moving it into a lower zone is acceptable. But generally, they're animals, they're tough. They've evolved to live in this really, really kind of treacherous life here, the intertidal, and a little bit of drying out is not going to harm them too much. Here's another nice sized one. So last year when we were here, we did a nighttime beach walk in January with some of our students in our Sea Stars and Beyond program, and we counted more than 200 of these in a single night, there are so many, and they're beautifully colored. Each one's a little bit different, but generally have that kind of blue and red and orangish pattern. Sometimes a little tan, sometimes really, really dark red. Before sea star wasting, this is a location where we would see lots of sunflower stars. They really enjoy and benefit from this sandy open habitat where they can move very, very quickly and consume things like the leather stars, sand dollars, mottled stars, anything they can catch really. If it's not gonna run away, the sunflower stars are able to catch it. But we haven't seen those big mature stars for many years. I haven't seen a big adult one since I think 2014. So here's another star here hanging out. Let's see. So at this location, this is a nature preserve, which means that there's no collecting or harvesting of any animal species here, which has been great for the biodiversity to have kind of a protected space where animals can reproduce and do all their normal behaviors. And it's great for us humans too, because we can come here and observe this cool habitat and garner appreciation for these cool, amazing creatures. So here's another nice, beautiful one. Love to see this. Oh, thank you for whoever donated. That is such a help to us. I apologize. My screen is covered in raindrops. I can't really read it very well. So apologies if things are out of focus or I'm not acknowledging your questions very well. But thank you for that donation. Harbor Wild Watch is a nonprofit organization, which means we do rely on grants and donations from people like you to keep our programs running. And with our goal being to inspire stewardship, we hope that we can continue to bring you these programs, not only during this kind of weird digital season where we can't meet in person, but on into the future as well. So those donations that you give are helping us achieve that goal. All right, I'm going to move up a little bit to a little bit more interesting territory with a few more things to talk about. This right here is Turkish towel, one of my favorite algae. It's got this awesome kind of washcloth texture. Maybe that's a good fundraiser we could do. We could do a day at the spa at the beach, and we'll just rub seaweed on you. Oh, here is a cool thing. Okay, so this beach is kind of famous for clay babies, which is a fancy term for clay concretion, which is where the clay kind of sticks together and forms these odd shapes that then get tumbled and hardened and kind of take on these bizarre forms. And they get called clay babies because they quite often take on almost like a snowman shape with a head and a body. Kind of fun to see. And it's one of those things that you want to leave the beach as you find it. So you can observe the clay babies here, but don't take them home with you so that more people get a chance. And then we've got a molt here This is a juvenile red rock crab that has gotten even bigger. So if I flip that open, you can see there's no one home inside. So crabs are crustaceans, and they're in the group in the phylum Arthropoda, which means the jointed foot. And if you take a look at their feet, they are indeed very jointed. And they have this hard exoskeleton that protects them. And that's a feature that every animal in the arthropod phylum has. So things like bees and ants and insects, those are all arthropods. And they have jointed legs and a hard outer skeleton. So got another. Somebody will have to tell me how many we're up to. I think this is like 6 or 7 here. Here's another. This one's a little more pale in coloration. So they do have some variability here. Cool to see. But those arthropods, as they grow, their shell does not grow with them. And so I like to think of it like a pair of shoes, right? If your feet grow, your shoes aren't going to grow with them. And so they have to shed their shell, their outer carapace, and then inflate their bodies with seawater, and then they'll harden and be a little bit bigger, and they have some more room to grow. And just like shoes, the younger animals who are growing a lot need to replace them more frequently. So this is a cool, really big clamshell. This is a heart cockle. Next we've got butter clam, another butter clam, all butter clams here. Butter clams are kind of interesting from a scientifically useful point of view. They take on, wow, look at the color of this one. It's so striking. They take on the effects of like plankton blooms and dangerous algae blooms, like paralytic shellfish poisoning is a big bloom. You might have heard it called red tide, although that's a bit of a misnomer because many times it's not actually red in color. But the butter clams hold on to those toxins in their body tissues for longer than most other species of clams. So other species can take on they'll take on the paralytic shellfish, and then a little bit of time will pass and they'll get that flush from their system, and then they're safe to eat. But the butter clams kind of concentrate those toxins in their body tissues, which is really useful for, say, the health department, because they can come and dig up a couple butter clams and get a good idea of how contaminated the beach is. And they do those reports regularly throughout the summer. Here's a big horse clam, another species of bivalve, which means 2 shells. And we're seeing lots and lots of clams here. Anytime you see lots of clams, you're probably gonna have good water quality, so lots of flow, bringing plenty of plankton, and that's definitely true of this sand spit. And you'll probably also start to have the clams big predators, and for clams here in the Pacific Northwest, that is both sea stars. So these leather stars, this is getting to be kind of a good sized one. Leather stars and other sea stars can eat the clams if they can capture them. A lot of these clams will be buried down in the surface. They'll be in underneath the sand. The one that's going to be on the top would be a cockle, the heart cockle. They're really ridged, heart-shaped kind of clamshell. Those guys like to sit right on the top. And moon snails can dig down into the sand and get the ones that are buried below, where the sea stars can only really eat the ones that are hanging out on top. Cool to see these guys. Sea stars they're so funny because, right, like whatever pose they were striking when the tide left them is what they're stuck with for the entire low tide. They don't really move around too much. So sometimes they take on really silly kind of poses. Stina made a post a couple of weeks ago. It was just great. It was like, which sea star are you? Identify your mood based on which sea star you identified with. And then she had a bunch of pictures of funny looking sea stars, which was just great. Anyway, we're just walking around. I think I can get almost to the end of the point here. We're definitely still seeing plenty of those leather sea stars. what I love about the leather sea stars is if you can view them when they're underwater, and today that's not going to happen. We've got a bit of wind and it's stirring up the sediment here, and there's a lot of stuff in the water making it difficult to view. But if you can watch them in clear water, those leather stars have these great feathery gills on their top surface. You can kind of see where the gills come out. They have a little tiny bit of texture there, and the gills do their respiration, so they're pulling oxygen from the water around them. And the sea star has to keep their gills clean. It can't let any barnacles or algae or plankton or anything settle on this animal, and so they have a secret weapon. They actually have tiny pinchers, microscopic pinchers, that will come out and attack anything that lands on them. And so sometimes you can trick them into attacking you by placing like your hair against it. So my hair's not long enough to reach the sea star unless I really contort, but sometimes you can stick your knuckle hairs on the sea star, and it doesn't take very long at all, maybe 10-20 seconds, and then you can pull, and you can feel a little bit of resistance there where they have pulled on your hairs, which is just crazy to me that they'll defend themselves even from foreign bodies like human hairs. Oh, here's a cool sight. We've got one rock here that is covered with like dozens and dozens of these frilled dogwinkle snails. And this is a big aggregation of them where they're probably mating and laying eggs. And we can see a few of the eggs right here. So they look almost like grains of rice that are standing on end. And they will lay these. These are some that are hatched. You see how these are kind of empty. There's no eggs. You can't really see anything inside there. Whereas these ones have some bright yellow little eggs inside. And these ones are a little high in the intertidal zone for this, but they've clombed onto like the only rock in this area. And they will all mate and lay eggs right on this spot. So I would expect in a couple days we could come back and see just rocks covered with these little rice-like eggs. Nice to see the next kind of generation. Let me pull one of these snails off to show you a little bit about them. So they have a foot, that's the slimy part they're going to use to crawl around with. And then if the snail feels threatened, they'll close up entirely, and that shows us their operculum. So that kind of deep red color, it's like a fingernail in texture. That's their operculum, which covers their foot entirely. So the whole snail can push themselves all the way inside of their shell, and that seals them on the inside. And so that they're protected, hopefully, from any predators who would try to eat them. And then when the coast is clear, they can come right back out again. And those operculums do have growth rings on them. I don't know if you guys can count them, but I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4 circles worth. So we're looking at a 4-year-old little snail here. And I've counted as much as 10 on this species, so they can be fairly long-lived. So we'll set our little back there. And this snail is a really important one for species of hermit crabs. That's their preferred home because it's kind of the mid-range snail between the tiny periwinkle snails and the really big moon snail shells. And hermit crabs require a snail shell as their home. So more leather stars. Still seeing plenty of them. You can see where the water gets a little bit clearer out there is where the current is really pushing the water past here. So another pretty leather star. We once attempted to do a kind of a fun group kayak adventure here to go from here at the Demolay Sandspit and head over to the Fox Island Bridge. And the currents changed before we could get there and started pushing the kayaks back past the Sandspit here. And so we actually had to like chase down a couple of the weaker paddlers who were getting just blown too far off course. Lots of wood debris here now as I'm rounding the point of the sand spit. So all this floating debris on the currents just washes up. So we've got lots and lots of bark and sticks and things like that. And those will be broken down eventually, or on the next high tide they will float and get pushed farther up the beach perhaps. This is another. Gosh, these guys are they're just so pretty, so striking. Hope you guys aren't bored of leather stars, right? Because that's the main thing we're looking at tonight. Anyway, I'll walk all the way around and show you the other side and how the habitat moves. But more leather stars. You'll notice we're not on the sand any longer. We're now on gravel and cobble, and the going actually gets a little bit more difficult here because the sand shifts beneath my feet quite a bit. Doesn't seem to bother the sea stars though. We've got lots of them here. Anytime you get a big group of predators like this is generally a sign that you're in a fairly productive habitat. Now this beach actually goes up quite a bit, so we've got some good vertical change in the slope, so animals can adjust to what tidal height, how much water cover that they need. But man, it's difficult to walk over here. Gravel beneath my feet is really moving. Let me head up because I'm gonna fall in if I keep going. The beach over there is really, really steep, so I'm gonna go up a little ways. And this is a place on the beach that you can come even on a high tide and see a good variety of evidence of animals. So there's lots and lots of different types of shells that wash up here, which tells you a little bit about what's living out there. There's barnacles, here's a heart cockle shell, butter clam shells, and this looks like an eastern soft no, that's a butter clam, just kidding. Oyster shell, this is a Japanese oyster, there's a live oyster in there, all sealed up tight until the tide comes back. And then as we get up to the very top, you'll see the shell debris. And this is really common on beaches where there is a lot of wave action, where the rocks are jostled about. All the barnacles and dead clam shells get kind of ground up and make that kind of almost sand-like. And then if we keep going all the way up, we should get to the Strand Line. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, let me flip myself around here. The Strand Line here is this row of debris where everything that floated up on the high tide ended up staying. So this is what we're dealing with, is all this. This is how high the tide came earlier today. And when we have these really drastic lows, there's usually a corresponding high tide as well. So this time of year we tend to call them king tides because they quite often will accompany like a storm surge. And that's extra water that kind of gets pushed in by the currents and the winds to really make the tide go quite high. And then now I'm at the top of the sand spit. And you can see why it's called a sand spit. It's really, really sandy here. And there is a lot of driftwood here. So these big logs, they wash up, and they actually do a really important job of stabilizing the sand and act as kind of an erosion buffer. So this is important. So that's why you should never you shouldn't go to the beach and like remove big driftwood. Little pieces is okay, but this big stuff is going to weigh down the sand and help the waves not to do so much damage and scouring out of the different materials. So yeah, this is the Anemones sand spit. Thanks for tuning in with us. I really appreciate it. I have to head into the wind a bit, and I know I'm just going to get so much wind noise, and I also need to wipe off my screen because it is covered in water. So I think this is a great spot to stop. So thanks for tuning in with us. I hope you enjoyed all the leather sea stars that we had and a little peek into some of the scientific data collection that we do here in the wintertime. Hopefully by the time it's summer, we can maybe invite you folks to come on out with us and do some some public programming again. But in the meantime, we'll continue to bring you these cool and interesting and cold and wet digital programs. So thanks, everybody. It's been really fun hanging out and chatting with you. I'm gonna tune in because I'm just getting soaked out here.